The health crisis that we're currently experiencing has brutally shown us how fragile our planet, our interactions and our way of living are, and how much we must build a more sustainable world. We have to reconsider the way we produce and consume. One of the challenges is to preserve biodiversity and the species that live on our planet. By always building more, humanity has forgotten that living beings are disappearing and that this is a threat to humankind. The protection of biodiversity also means reviewing our own diet to better nourish ourselves, but also nourish more people. Our agriculture must be more respectful and more reasonable. 5 years ago, France and the rest of the world committed to reducing their greenhouse gas emissions. But today, we must do even more. In order to limit climate disruption, we have to change our energy consumption. We have to reduce it, but also find new, low-carbon and renewable sources. We must also rethink the way we consume. We can no longer produce, buy, and throw things away. Waste is precious. It can be recycled, upcycled, and reused in order to promote a more circular and fairer economy. The future is also an increasingly populated planet. Together, we can build a new, less polluted, less energy-consuming, more intelligent, breathable, inclusive, and fair cities to create the world of tomorrow. So, are you ready? Yes, 3, 2, 1. You, behind your screens, are you ready? Ready for the ecological transformation to build the world of tomorrow? Here are some of the questions raised in this video and that we will try to answer. All together, hello everyone. Welcome to our talk on live to meet the emergency of our ecological transformation. We'll be here for about 2 hours together with a very full agenda. Several speakers, citizens, elected officials, employees, social partners, industrials, economists from France and beyond. So we will be asking them about their convictions, their ideas, their solutions, and their concrete commitments given these major challenges. How can we make industries more virtuous? How can we develop an economy of solutions? How can we increase our expertise while inventing the professions of tomorrow? Those are some of those questions we'll be debating today. And you can also ask your own questions at any time. We'll show you how in just a second. So directly through the website. I'm sure you're already familiar with this. So to begin our live talk, I have the great pleasure to welcome Antoine Frérot. Hello. Hello, Nathalie Lévy. Hello, Antoine Frérot. Of course, you are CEO of Veolia, and you decided to host this talk. And so you've brought together several stakeholders from Veolia, but also employees, directors, citizens, to talk about the ecological transformation in full transparency. So why is this a fundamental way of going about things, in your view? Yes, indeed. I thought it was very important and interesting as well to open up a debate with everybody who is committed within Veolia and all of the stakeholders in our company, because the major project that we're currently building at Veolia is a project that's designed for them. At Veolia, we don't do things on our own. And in our company purpose, we state that the prosperity of Veolia is grounded in its usefulness for all stakeholders. So we have to be able to dialogue with them and also to listen to what their expectations are. And that's why we launched the merger with Suez. And I'm very happy to be able to talk about it today here with you, because that's part of the way we do things. Because this talk here is accessible to all. We're live. which is pretty rare. And I want everybody to understand that what they will get out of this project, well, that this whole project is for their own good. It's for all stakeholders. So everybody can hope to benefit from it. And that's what's most important, much more important than just a fight on the stock market. Yes, which has been largely covered in the press over the past 6 months. So can we say, you know, whatever we want here today? Yes, of course. We're here to speak openly. This talk, I hope, will be the opportunity to talk about the ecological transformation first and foremost, because that's the real reason behind this merger. If we want to become a benchmark company, a champion of the ecological transformation, it's really to meet the ever-increasing expectations of our stakeholders, our industrial clients, those who decided to fight against carbon, to fight against pollution, and our municipal clients, local elected officials who are fighting to improve quality of life in their cities, people who want to make more of a difference in their work, and also future employees, young people who want to give more meaning to their work. And lastly, or also for our shareholders, when they invest in our company, it's because they really believe that we're useful. So I believe that this is really the good opportunity to raise the right questions. What is it to succeed in the ecological transformation? And that's why we're here all today. Yes, to have answers, and then stakeholders will be joining us here on the stage. So to become the world champion of the ecological transformation, why is this indispensable for Veolia and its stakeholders? Because indispensable, not everybody thinks so. Well, actually, our project with the merger came out of an opportunity. Suez was put on the market, and for us, this was a unique opportunity to create in France a world champion of the ecological transformation. World champion, so why? Well, to be able to meet the ecological emergency that we're in and to come up with efficient solutions. So you mean that currently you're not efficient enough? No, we are, but we have to do better if we really want to reach the Paris Agreement objectives, but also to protect biodiversity and to create a more sustainable world. And for that, we have to reinvent, maybe even create a revolution in our activities in the coming years. For me, there are three main categories of our professions at the heart of the ecological transformation. First of all, there are traditional professions, distribution of drinking water, collecting household waste. Those are our traditional professions. But we're going to have to reinforce them and reinvent them to increase their impact and their performance. With digital technologies, coming up with new forms of governance with our clients, to make them more aware of everything we do for them, and to be able to challenge them in terms of performance. And another category of activities, these are solutions that our companies have, but have just recently been developed. So we master them, but they're not yet widely deployed. And to be able to succeed in our ecological transformation, we have to develop them more. For example, recycling plastic. This is very important. Veolia and Suez each have their own specificities. We recycle different resins. So now we can recycle more than 80%. With the two companies together, with their two different clienteles, this is a project. It's not 1 + 1, it's 2 × 2. Plastic recycling has to be generalized, and so we have to pool our means to go farther, better. Same thing for wastewater. Water is much too precious to only use it once. But with better water treatment, then we can use it better for agriculture, for industry, for people as well. And then the third category of activities, those are solutions that don't yet exist. And those solutions, we're going to need them to succeed in this ecological transformation. 20 years from now, I'm sure we'll be using half of the solutions that don't exist yet today. So our project is to invent them, to create these solutions. Few examples. Batteries for electric cars. There are very few now, because there are very few electric cars, but in 2030 there will be 1 million batteries that have been used up, and this is toxic waste. But it also has very important components: lithium, cobalt, nickel. And now we have the means to become a leader of battery recycling in Europe. And also, we have the means to build new batteries. And another example, air quality. How can we guarantee air quality in public buildings? That's one of the most important stakes for the environment and for public health today. Air quality in schools, in supermarkets, hospitals, offices. This is really a major challenge. And our two companies have begun developing ideas, and they're very highly complementary, because air quality is going to be a huge market in tomorrow's world, and especially 20 years from now. I could give lots of examples. Carbon capture, the links between the environment, agriculture, and food. How can we feed 10 billion people in 2040 with less water, with less energy, with less soil? We have a role to play, and that, for me, is succeeding in our ecological transformation. And our skills are complementary, and our human resources as well will add up to be able to invent those solutions that we need so badly. So yes, those are very telling examples, Antoine Frérot. And as we saw in that short video, yes, this does all make sense on an industrial level to merge these two companies. But this will have consequences that will go beyond Veolia and Suez. Well, yes, and that is why the stakeholders are so impacted. Because to come up with the solutions for tomorrow, and if you take French territories, those will be the ones who will benefit the most. They're in the front row. And also, once we have implemented these solutions in France, obviously we will export them around the world. We want to reinvent, revolutionize our profession. And we've already started, but we have to continue with this transformation, with reinventing how we do things. This is what will enable us to win these challenges more quickly by adding our strengths with Suez, but also by listening to those who are involved, all these stakeholders, and that's why we're having this talk today. So the stakeholders who will be joining us later, so elected officials, citizens, people from industry, here on the set or by video link. So before we open up our first round table, if you may, I have one last question for you. So you, Antoine Frérot, what is your mindset after you've launched this idea of a merger with Suez? It's been 6 months. There's been a lot of media hype, a lot of criticism. So tell us about your mindset. It's the same as on the very first day, for all of the reasons I just laid out. This project, our project, is the right solution for both companies, for all of our employees, for our clients, our industrial clients, our municipal clients. It's good for the planet. and for future generations. And it's good for our country. It fills me with enthusiasm, and it really will be good for all of France. I'm sorry that some people are so hostile, but that does not lessen my determination to see this through. And the goal of our talk here today is not to lose sight of the reasons why we have this project. It's an industrial project for development, growth, long-term growth. And over the past 10 months, I have regularly given updates on what we're proposing and what we want to do. The world is changing. There are crises, maybe more and more frequently, health crises, ecological crises as well. And the emergency for the ecology is still there, and we have to adapt. Yeah, okay, it does lead to some friction because it entails rethinking the whole sector, transforming it, leaving the comfortable world of habits. But I'm fully ready to meet that friction. But I'm also very attentive to people's worries in terms of competition. Yes, competition is necessary, especially in France, once the merger comes through. For jobs as well. We don't want to destroy jobs. On the contrary, we want to create jobs with the social conditions which are equal to those of today or better. And also sovereignty. Our project is about France. And I want to reassure and I want to convince people how useful this merger is. And what I'm most attentive to, because that's my role, is the future of Veolia and our strategy. And that was the objective we set a year ago, to make Veolia the benchmark company in the ecological transformation. That's our group strategy, and that strategy hasn't changed. Okay, very clear. Thank you very much, Antoine Frérot. So that was just the introduction, but it does set the tone for the next 2 hours, transparency, explanations. We'll also have questions from journalists and industry. The industry is at the heart of this ecological transformation. But are the industries themselves convinced of this? Do they really want to change? Have they given themselves the means? What are the challenges they have to overcome? And what solutions are they willing to implement? So industries, are they a hurdle or a driver of the ecological transformation? Well, that's the subject of our first round table. And you'll stay here with me. Thank you, Antoine Frérot. Climate disruption, pollution, land use, biodiversity. Companies have their own impact on the planet and those who live on it. But today, they are becoming aware of their environmental footprint. I am convinced that Europe is the continent of the ecological revolution, of the food revolution. We have to seize this opportunity.
Persist, and so we must persist. Our vision for the future is a world with zero crashes, zero emissions, and zero congestion.
With their thousands of employees and their capacity for innovation, industries are in a key position to find solutions at a very large scale. What will be their true role in the ecological transformation? So the role of industry in the ecological transformation, that is what we will be talking about here. So, hurdles or drivers, what role will they be playing? And what role are they already playing? So, our guests here, and then behind their screens, we have Annick Bata. Welcome. You are a member of the Citizens Convention for the Climate, so you'll tell us a little bit about that. And we also have Ilham Kadri. Hello.
Bonjour, Madame Lévy.
So you're CEO of Solvay. Thank you for being here with us. And Fabrice Beaulieu, who is Executive Vice President of Reckitt. Hello, Fabrice. Can you hear us?
Bonjour, Madame Lévy. Bonjour, Ilham.
Hello, Madame Lévy. Hello, Ilham. Thank you. Thanks for being here with us live. And Estelle Braclianoff. Hello, Estelle. You are the Deputy Director in charge of Veolia. Hello, everyone, and welcome. So, Annick Bata, if I may, I'll start with you. I'm giving you the floor because you're a citizen, And you took part in the Citizens Convention for the Climate that we talked so much about. So how did this work? How did you go about it? How did you progress? What types of proposals did you make? How did this all work so that we can really see what it felt like? Well, hello, Madame Lévy, Mr. Frérot. Yes, I was one of the 150 citizens who were chosen at random to take part in a democratic experiment, collective thought around a single topic. And our mandate was, how can we come up with propositions to reduce our greenhouse gases by at least 40% by 2030. And so that was really at the heart of the topic today. So the process, first of all, allowed us to assess the situation of the environment and the climate. So we tried to understand the various players, industrials, municipalities, elected officials, organizations, not-for-profits, other citizens, to understand what the hurdles and the obstacles were to deploy the ecological transformation. And then we had to find out what the levers were to help us take action in the ecological transformation. And then we started thinking about how we could draft our proposals. 150 citizens, very symbolically, came up with 150 proposals. 149 were validated, and 146 then became part of the government's roadmap. So Antoine Frérot and Estelle Brachlianoff, I'll give you the possibility to react to what you've just heard. So there were proposals. They also went to visit sites on the ground to really be able to see how things worked. Yep. And I just wanted to come back to the importance of citizens and consumers and all stakeholders to make progress in this ecological transformation. So, for example, plastic recycling. For years and years, so there were laws that were voted to motivate people to recycle. But things completely changed a few years ago. Citizens and consumers finally realized the importance, because there were videos, there were photos of turtles, and we all have those images. And then all of a sudden, change happened. And the major brands tackled the same topic. So it was really a collective willingness on the part of elected officials, but then companies such as Veolia came up with technical solutions, and then also there was more demand for recycled products. So recycling suddenly just took off. It skyrocketed 3 or 4 times faster than in the past. So that's just to show the importance of consumers. And it also shows, so Estelle Brachlianoff, the fact that these are their household products, things we use every day, sometimes without even realizing it. And so that's what we'll see with you, Ilham Kadri. So Solvay's products, they're everywhere, in our daily lives, in our food, consumer goods, in cars and planes and batteries, connected Internet of Things, even medical applications or air purification, water purification. And yet, chemistry isn't always well seen by citizens. So we have a citizen with us here today. What can you tell her and tell us to reassure us? Hello, Madame Lévy. I'm delighted to be here today and to have this opportunity to talk about this ecological transition. It's transformation that's important, like Mr. Frérot was saying. And it's true, Solvay, we're a chemistry company, and that's the mother of all industry. Without chemistry, we wouldn't have any innovation. We wouldn't have a green revolution. Chemistry is everywhere. You gave some examples. We replace metal with lighter products, lighter materials to allow us to use less fuel, to emit fewer greenhouse gases, and to have cleaner mobility. Without chemistry, without Solvay, you wouldn't have any electric car batteries. We produce batteries, green hydrogen. We work in food, natural vanilla. We recycle waste. What's important to know is that this is a transformation which is available to all industries, including chemicals. We were labeled as polluters, but actually polluters are now part of the solution, and this is where we need change. And we need more conversations like this one here today. At Solvay, we have a roadmap for sustainable development, which we call Solvay One Planet. We have 10 concrete objectives for 2030. This roadmap is part of our variable compensation, the profit sharing of all of our employees in production, so 10% for all of them, including myself. So it's not just on paper, and reducing greenhouse gases represents 20% of our compensation scheme. And we're aligned on the Paris Agreement. We started last February. So the science-based targets. So this includes the carbon footprint of our clients and of our own activities. We've given up coal in our production processes. We've been using it for 160 years from the very beginning, but now we're orienting ourselves towards cleaner energy. We don't yet know how to do it around the world, but by 2030, science will have changed. And we've reached 8% reduction for 2019 and 2020. Excluding the drop in activities due to COVID. And between 2014 and 2018, there's a huge drop. So when you want to do something, when you want to reduce your emissions, so it's about 1.8 million tons of CO2. So that's about 1 million fewer cars on the roads. But then you have to make savings wherever you can with natural resources, water, biodiversity. All of this is very important. We have to be sustainable. The company has to be sustainable. It has to be good for humans and good for the planet. It's very interesting what you're saying, and I'll come back to you in just a minute. But first of all, Mr. Fabrice Beaulieu. So Veolia, right? So Fabrice Beaulieu, you also have products that we use in our daily lives. These are brands that we're all familiar with. Edwig Finish, Calgon, Vanish, Nurofen, Scholl, Estera, just to name a few. Because not everybody knows Rake-It, but you do know those other brands. So cleaning products, pharmaceuticals, food for babies. So all of these products can help consumers change their consumer habits to make them more environmentally friendly. Well, how and why?
I believe that we're seeing many great transformations in the world. Monsieur Frérot said that very eloquently. We have an expectation, a growing expectation worldwide, in France as well, to see brands much more involved. And brands can involve themselves in different ways, including in sustainable development, and to accelerate the transformation of our economy and our consumption habits to make the economy more circular. The brands you've mentioned are in our everyday life through consumption, but also through communication, through advertising and the social network. So we can evolve towards more circular systems through recharging batteries, for instance, or through product design. What is the proportion of recycled plastic we use? And we've worked a lot with the teams at Veolia on this issue. We're also talking about active ingredients. Are they coming from biochemistry? That's when it comes to innovation. But for these types of product, innovation is usually a source of growth. So there's really productivity stake here for brands like these to use innovation apply them to the transformation towards a more circular economy to reinvent existing models and produce growth on these categories of products. There's also communication. There's a potential for these brands which have a global presence, and they can educate people, inspire them, and change our daily habits. A great partnership that we have with Veolia is around the protection of drinking water, which we can consider to be something that's infinite, that we can consume without ever thinking about it, but it's not the case anymore. There's a brand, which is the Finnish brand, which is working side by side with Veolia to explain that we don't have to rinse cutlery before you put it in the washing machine. And when you do the calculations, you can see that it's 22 billions of liters of water in France on a yearly basis, which are being used and wasted. So it's a very, very hands-on examples of the small everyday habits which we can change, and that's something where the brand has a real role to play. And this is it's about giving information to people so they do things differently. So I can see there are many questions from our viewers and participants who are looking at us over the internet, and we're going to answer. But when you hear Fabrice Beaulieu, William Kadri, Ms. Kta, when we're talking about all these products, the way they're designed, the way they are recycled, the way we can use them, it goes with the trend, this green trend. So do you think they've really understood? So I really don't agree just in the frame of this interview. I'm coming back to what you said at the start. I went to see industrial companies like Renault or large retail or fast food companies. There's a communication on products saying that these are green products, that these are products that are recycled or that can be recycled. But when you come to the trash bin, there's no possibility to recycle, really. So today, the mentality of the French population, we're told that the French citizen is not ready, but maybe there's also a lack of willingness to do things right. And so there's really a problem of transition. Citizens really want responsible green products. And so Reckitt and Sauget were one of the suppliers of one of my former companies, so I know these products well, so it's good to communicate. But what we're also an issue today is greenwashing. How do you convince citizens today that there is this reality in the field? But now I'm part of the Produce and Work group, and that we're talking about innovations around water, around trash. Well, we really have to work together on these issues. So, Mr. Frérot, an answer concerning this? So, first of all, a remark on what Mr. Beaulieu and Ms. Kadri said. Reckitt really illustrates these solutions that we know how to use, but they aren't used enough today throughout the world. And then there's solutions we have to invent. Ms. Kadri talked about getting rid of coal in energy. And with Veolia, we've designed a project together for 100% renewable energy for their mobile manufacturing company. And in a few years, coal will be out of the picture, and the factory will be only powered with renewables. And that's something we could deploy throughout the world. And with Reckitt, Mr. Beaulieu knows it well, we supply a lot of polypropylenes recycled. This is a hard plastic, for instance, for the bumpers of cars. But it's not deployed enough. We could add a lot more of this type of plastic in products like shampoo bottles. We also supply this type of plastic, this type of recycled plastic. So it can be used in a wide range of applications, and we can deploy it. And Ms. Kadri also talked about electric batteries. And with Solvay, we have a project to build a solution that doesn't exist yet. This is recycling electric batteries and extracting the interesting materials like lithium, cobalt, and nickel. All of the materials that come within the production of a battery, not only so they're no longer dangerous to the environment, but also so we can reuse them to make new batteries. And that's a project which in 10 years will allow us to become the leaders in Europe for battery recycling, both in Europe and the world. And I also wanted to mention this partnership, broach upon this partnership for recycled batteries with Veolia. You're also developing a gel, antivirus, antibacterial gel, which is active for 24 hours on surfaces. So could you tell us a bit more? So that's one of the miracles of COVID-19. In a time of crisis, that's when employees give the best of themselves and new innovations arrive. So that's why we have these vaccines in a record time. And for us, we're talking about this new cleaning technology, which we launched last year, and they protect surfaces from bacteria and viruses such as COVID-19, but it stays active for 24 hours. It's a protection of any surface. With our clients like Reckitt, we are deploying this with their brands that are well known by consumers, which are going to allow us to go one step further. So coming back to what Mr. Frérot said, I'm an optimist by design and by training. I'm a scientist, and I believe today we have solutions that are ready, and there are solutions that we have to co-invent together. And co-research is a new paradigm of this green transformation, because we have to create these new systems. We can't do what Veolia does. We can't do what Reckitt does. We can only do what we do as chemists. And to be able to work and deliver on these projects, there are a lot of investments to do to go towards green hydrogen, to reuse products that are discarded, such as batteries. We need this cooperation. So it's a real struggle. It's a work of collaboration, of innovation between the private and public sector. And to bring an answer to that, we have to judge the performance. Yesterday, we talked about financial performance. Today, we're talking about non-financial performance, CSR, and governance. And that's really an opportunity. It's great for the planet, for our Earth, for our house. It's good for human beings, but it's also good for profits, because the circular economy represents billions of dollars of opportunities in all sectors of the economy. So I had one more question. We hear a lot about cooperation, circular economy, these groups coming together, these industries working together. This is a necessity. Yes, it's an absolute necessity. That's something that needs to happen. We either have pre-existing solutions and we have to implement them, or we have to invent them, and that's really what we do at Veolia. And I wanted to mention greenwashing. I think that to avoid greenwashing, the only thing you can do to avoid greenwashing is proof. And what's interesting is that in a company you can actually prove things. On top of financial performance, you can look at the rate of recycled materials in packaging. You can look at the carbon footprint. That's also something we do at Veolia. We do this for ourselves as well. To give you an example, a few years ago, we had a percentage of our activity on the circular economy that was measured, and today we're measuring over 5 billion, which is 2 or 3 times more than a few years ago. And it also has to have, to make sense economically, this green transformation, which means that the solutions aren't only technical, they also have to be meaningful for citizens and for the industry. And when you talk about the circular economy, it has a lot of advantages for the planet. It also has an advantage, which is to give us access to rare resources. When Antoine Frérot was talking about cobalt, nickel, lithium in the batteries of electric cars, we know that if we don't recycle these products in 20 or 30 years, we'll run out of these materials, and this will become a rare resource, and there will be waiting lists to buy, for instance, a new phone because we won't have access to these precious materials. The good news is we found one of the solutions today, which is the circular economy. You look at waste, and you can find a source of these resources that will be precious tomorrow. And these sources are also in our countries, which shortens supply chains. So the issues of container ships on the Suez Canal, which come from the 4 corners of the planet, well, this problem disappears. It makes supply chains much shorter because a part of the cobalt, a part of the nickel, a part of these resources are already present in Europe. In Europe, when we talk about geopolitical issues, but we may talk about this soon. But first, Mr. Beaulieu, and I know it's important for you as well, Ilan Kadri, the model for the company of tomorrow, the way in which co-workers, your clients and consumers influence you, they're influencers in the company. How much does that impact your employees, your collaborators, Fabrice Beaulieu? It's true that our employees are extremely motivated by the idea of changing the mission of the company and the brands. And employees, wherever they work on production, or design and innovation, or communication, they are extremely motivated. They want to make the brands more useful and move it from an individual scale to a collective scale. When I was hiring, that's what young people are talking about. They're talking about what Reckitt does to help sustainable development, to reinforce its positive contribution to society, and they want to talk about the proof we have, what we've done, commercial advertising that we've done for this or that brand, which have changed the behavior in a positive fashion. For instance, for the conservation of water as a resource. So a bit later on, we'll have a roundtable with employees. We'll talk about motivation, involvement, propositions they may make. But just, Anipata, something about what Ms. Brakianov was mentioning about resources. It's very important for the way you see things and issues in France, in Europe, throughout the world. The management of resources, you also had a point of view on that. Yes, it's an issue which I'm very aware of. Today we talk about lithium batteries. How do we recycle them? And when I went to talk to Renault, I tell them, today as companies you have a trajectory. The heart of one of our propositions in terms of environmental impact is that today there is no obligation for companies. And the fact that companies are taking control of this indicator has allowed them to show that they were doing things rather well. But today there's only 30% of these companies that are actually in line with our expectations in terms of reporting. So having this index to see how the company is evolving year on year is a crucial point for recycling. For the circular economy, we wanted to go further than the circular economy. And what does this generate? Well, we sometimes see conflicts between the supplier of the resource and the recycling world. How do we really integrate a willingness, because there is a volatility of markets for recycled products. And for you, industrials, you talk a lot about economic value. So how do we create real competition and real interest in these issues? And I'm just going to broach upon the subject of geopolitics very shortly. It's very important. You've reminded us about COP21, a national strategy. It's important to have a reference to our national strategy and the reduction of our greenhouse gases, for instance. Antoine Frérot, a reaction on what Anita just said. Madame Capa said we need to evolve in the right direction, faster, and on a bigger scale. Well, there's an easy way to do that. To pollute is more expensive than to not pollute. It's true for all pollutions. It's what we've integrated in our country a long time ago for water, and it should be the same with carbon. If emitting carbon, CO2, was more expensive than not emitting CO2, everyone will start aligning on their policies accordingly. So someone's going to pay for pollution. It's either going to be our generation with public funds, or more likely our children and our grandchildren. Well, if we wanted to work in a clean and green world, we should have a principle that when you pollute, you pay. And once polluting is going to be more expensive than not polluting, it's going to work out. So this principle is what some people call the carbon tax, but I'd rather call it the carbon compensation, because a tax has a negative connotation. Compensation allows us to go twice as fast. Do you really believe that would change behavior? Yes, absolutely. An economic agent, even a citizen, a consumer, it will look at the price. And if polluting is more expensive than not polluting, any economic agent, any company will implement solutions that allow it to not pollute, because it will be more expensive. And so virtuous companies will be helped, so it's going to go twice as fast, of course. Of course, if not everyone's doing that, there's something unfair in global competition, which is why we need this carbon tax on the borders of the EU, which is something we talk a lot, but it's going to end up being implemented, because if we do that intelligently, over time, this will be the weapon that will beat pollution. So we've talked a lot about the circular economy. It's your bread and butter, your everyday work. So please tell us about your goals, where you are, where you stand, and how to improve things. So let's start about Veolia's goals, about the receipts we have. So we want to recycle 600,000 of tons of plastic by 2023. We have targets for reducing the consumption of water, which Mr. Beaulieu was talking about earlier. We have targets on biodiversity on our own sites, targets for reducing our carbon footprint directly, our data of our clients, because we help our clients a lot to find solutions for themselves within the frame of this green transformation. So in all these domains, whether it's carbon emissions, the use of resources, or the production of resources. So that's everything we've talked about. We're going to continue roundtables on our subject. Thank you very much, Anita, for being with us, for sharing with us your experiences within the frame of this citizen convention. Thank you, Ilham Kadri and Fabrice Beaulieu, for being with us and participating to this talk today in Paris. We're going to continue because companies, citizens are concerned by the green transformation, but also local government is very concerned. Public agents are concerned. So what is their point of view? What are they doing? How can they transform their services to allow us to continue to benefit from the same services? What are their available means and what are the issues they face? So actors are bystanders of green transformation. This is our new subject. Cities and territories are at the heart of our lives, and they have the power to change the lives of citizens on the quality of the air we breathe, on the quality of the water we drink, on the amount of energy we use. These changes, they have to happen thanks to those who represent these issues.
This is a matter of life and death. Choose life for the people. Choose life for the ecosystems. Choose life for the planet.
But on their scale, what can local government do to imagine and implement solutions for the ecological transformation? So we are now ready to start our second roundtable, and for these questions, we are very happy to have the mayor of Boulogne-sur-Mer with us. We also have the strategy director of Veolia. We also have guests through video conference with us, Antoine Frérot. We have Stuart Love, which is the CEO of the Westminster City Council.
Good morning, can you hear me?
So translation is happening simultaneously. And the mayor of Nevers, Mr. Thuriot, Denis Thuriot. Hello, welcome to this talk, which is going to occur over the next 2 hours. So we have less than 2 hours for this roundtable typically, but we still have a lot of time to talk and to answer all the questions of our viewers on the internet. Frédéric Cuvillier, you are here with us from Boulogne-sur-Mer. There's a question to start it off. You've launched an ecological transition in your city through a contract with the state. So what is this exactly? So we have several documents, agendas, local public policies. We have this contract with the state for an ecological transition, and the PCEAT, the climate plan, which has a territorial level for energy. And the question is, how do we rely on what's already being done, and how do we move forward into the future with the issues to come? So Boulogne-sur-Mer is a port, and we have urban issues, we have rural issues as well, but we have one major issue, which is the maritime issue. And we need to, there are many initiatives, there are industrial initiatives, and often we consider that industries are turning their back on local issues, but that's not the case at all. I believe one of the solutions to the crises which we are facing are solutions which come from innovation and the necessary integration of public action, territorial resources, and private innovation. And we have to be able to reinvent the solutions for local resilience. A few words on what Mr. Cuvillier just said. So maybe just one thing to say, Mr. Mayor. A territory like yours is very involved in fishing, and we hear more and more that there won't be enough fish in the sea to feed everyone. Is it a concern of yours? Are there any alternative solutions to high sea fishing, deep sea fishing? So that's a fundamental question on nutritional quality, on nutritional issues on a planetary scale, and this is directly linked to the economic approach we have in our city. It's the first port in France, but it's also the first European center for the transformation of sea resources. And we have specifically dedicated departments for research, and our universities have started working on aquaculture, and we are at the crossroads between research, the sciences of the sea, and economic models. We have great development projects in the domain of aquaculture. We use seawater inland, for instance. We also try to optimize the use of water resources. We have two very big projects in Boulogne, which are aquatic farms, which are going to set up and which we are helping because we need to produce salmon, especially high-quality salmon, which will answer our needs both environmentally, nutritionally, and we don't want this to be a nonsense answer like the ones we see today. And we're also talking about an important issue, which is the purity of the product. I have two more stakes in terms of the solutions we want to implement. Aquaculture mustn't use up all the water in the river, and we have to be able to recycle the water, and fish are very sensitive to the quality of water. We have to be able to recycle a large amount of this water, and I believe this is an important thing to consider for the development of aquaculture. So that's already something we know how to do, recycled used water, but you also have to feed the fish. And if we want to save calories, cereals for men, humans, then we need maybe a solution for fish with bioconversion. Maybe we can invent new solutions for fish farms. We can reserve the calories of cereals for humans and feed fish and cattle with organic waste, which is very adequate for it. So there are many questions from the people, our viewers, concerning biomass, for instance. I just wanted to move a few miles away to speak to our guest from the UK, Stuart Love. Thank you for being with us. The City of Westminster has a strategy in 4 pillars. Correct me if I'm wrong, but when you talk about Westminster, a district in the center of London, we're talking about the Parliament, the Royal Palace. So the circular economy and economic and electrical consumption. So what is driving this conversion towards a more inclusive, a more modern city?
Good morning. And over and above what you've already said about Westminster being home to the Houses of Parliament, etc., we are also the biggest economic activity area in the country for local government. We are home to 250,000 residents. About 1 million people a day prior to the pandemic visited Westminster, and about 750,000 of those came here to work. So we have a very big challenge in balancing the needs of our residents, of the businesses that are here that are important not just to Westminster but to the entire country, and in particular the people who come and work and visit in Westminster. And our overarching vision is City for All, and within City for All one of the pillars that you mentioned that runs through everything is cleaner and greener. And the reason why cleaner and greener is so important to us is we have been told by our residents and the businesses in Westminster how important climate action is. So as an organization, we, along with lots of other parts of local government in the UK, declared a climate emergency. And within that, we have committed that as an organization, so as a city council, we will be carbon neutral by 2030. And then as a city, that the city itself will be carbon neutral by 2040. But clearly, just declaring a climate emergency doesn't in itself affect change. So we have, as part of our published strategy, we've set out targets, we've set out action plans that do take us through the next few years. We're still developing the longer term approach. And we are working very closely with our partners because actually Westminster City Council on its own is responsible for a very small percentage of the total emissions in the city. And in particular, we're working very closely with Veolia, looking at how we collect waste, electrifying vehicle fleets, and lots of other innovations from across the world that Veolia is looking to bring to bear in Westminster.
It's really a sort of live laboratory. We're going to talk about that a little more very quickly, but now I would like to talk to Denis Curion, the mayor of Nevers. When you're leading a city like Nevers, what does ecological transformation mean to you? What is the main issue you're confronted to? What is the difference, for instance, what are your differences with your neighbors, and what are you working on with Veolia? Well, it's not something entirely new to us. It's something that everyone's very interested in right now, but things have been, we've been working on it for a very long time with a lot of strong will to improve things. And we're even working in the larger Nevers urban area. But at the time, we were working on the basis of the government plan of 2012, and we were working on saving thermal energy in housing. These were plans that were already implemented back then and that are still being implemented today. And when I was mayor during my last tenure, we were working on housings for the elderly, and Mr. Frérot knows that I'm very interested in this from an experimental perspective, but we're also paying a lot of attention to water leaks, for instance. And we've improved the quality of our water distribution network by 15%, and that's very significant. We used to lose a lot more water that wasn't being recycled, and that's something you have to avoid. The water we use in the summer is also the water we should use in the winter. So, and it's also about heating, what we implemented for heating. And there are many projects to recycle heat, to save heat when we treat the waters. I could mention many other approaches, but it's a very strong policy with budgets behind it, with citizens that are contributing to this through their taxes, and a lot of policies that are being implemented in terms of mobility, hydrogen. But I believe that our territory is no longer lagging behind in this domain, and we're ready to answer positively to this new state.
Then just to adapt because it's the right time. So coming back here to the stage, Antoine Frérot and Olivier Brousse. So we just had 3 different areas. So they're complementary and they're different. Westminster is kind of like a bubble. In Nevers, Denis Curion, we're talking about water, how important it is, and then fish. So on these 3 illustrations, maybe you could react to these. Yes, there was a great idea, is that the water, winter water has to become summer water. It's true. That's the water that's consumed. On average, throughout the year, they go through the water treatment facilities. In France and in Nevers, there's lots of water in the rivers, but in summer, sometimes there isn't enough water. So the idea would be to have water from the water treatment center to purify it even better, and then to store it, to re-inject it in the river, for example. It's a wonderful project, but it's very complicated because obviously we mustn't pollute the groundwater. So we have to take all precautions. But this is certainly the wonderful recipe we need to fight against water scarcity. Because if we could store this water somewhere where it won't evaporate, so in the water tables, and then we could use it when we need it, and that would be a wonderful solution. Of course, we have to make sure we don't do anything stupid, but then we could share it around the world. France has quite a lot of water. There are many other countries with fewer resources, but in France, there's still water scarcity every summer. So this is a very wonderful project that we might be able to carry out with the agricultural stakeholders to store water that has been perfectly processed. So environment, solutions. So turning to you, Olivier Brousse, in charge of the environment. So could you give us some concrete examples of innovations that could be replicated elsewhere? First of all, what's striking in the three examples we just saw, the Boulogne-sur-Mer, Nevers, and Westminster, this is the very specific relationship between Veolia and our clients that we've been able to create over the years. What's really striking is that altogether, we're not just service providers. We want to be partners so that together we can solve the problems for the ecological transformation and to create opportunities for fish farming or for new economic sectors. So these really close partnerships built over years is really how we're going to create solutions. So now in terms of innovations, we've seen that in these three cities, they each have their own ways of innovating. There are others within the Veolia network. But basically, the strength of our network is that we collect these innovations, no matter where they are, Westminster, Nevers, Boulogne, or elsewhere around the world, and to share them with our clients. Let me give you a few examples. So we manage a lot of the transformations due to climate change. We have an experiment which is going on preventing floods south of Paris. With local authorities, we aim to anticipate, to send out warnings whenever water levels are rising, and then to manage these rises with a very complicated system of pools and retention basins. So that's an essential innovation to adapt to climate change that can now be replicated elsewhere. And I know that the mayor of Nevers, this is very important for you. So these are solutions we can share with other clients. Another example that Antoine Frérot mentioned, this is converting organic waste. Before it was considered waste, now it's considered a resource because we're finding more and more uses for this waste. There's an example from Malaysia, a factory that raises insects using bio-waste and that creates animal protein. And perhaps maybe one day they'll feed your salmon in Boulogne. Another experiment in southern France. So these are solutions really that have for local problems, but then they can be shared elsewhere. So innovations, solutions, we'll come back to this, but there's a word that comes back again and again currently over the past few years. It says resilience. So turning to you, Mr. Cuvillier, you were talking about resilience of local territories. What do you mean by that? Usually it's associated with, unfortunately, with terrorist attacks or natural disasters. Well, our territories live, they suffer, they bounce back. They find the resources, human resources, innovations, social fabric, industrial fabric, partnerships that we have with Veolia, for example, to really provide structure for the future. And it's a virtuous cycle where we reinvent and we create the world of tomorrow. That's our preoccupation. This idea that it's a new vision, no. Local territories, this is where we live and this is where our children will be living. So forever we've tried to improve our living conditions. In Nevers and Boulogne, all local areas have crises, they have shocks they have to go through. We're never spared. And to build the future, well, we do so based on resilience, based on our capacity to innovate. We're talking about water, about waste, about energy. But there's a reality in my city, which is actually quite poor, with the economic changes. There have been crises, but a lot of human wealth, a lot of heritage, strength of our companies and innovation. When we worked with Veolia around how can we transform something that might be considered a weakness, how do we turn that into a strength? How can we use the ocean? How can we use water networks? How can we desalinate seawater? How can we think about fish farming for the future? And that's why we need major groups like Veolia, especially French groups that defend French interests. This is a struggle. So another champion is Suez. But because of globalization, well, there are some drawbacks. Globalization, it can also start here at home, based on our own strengths. That's also something we have to bear in mind. And so it's this undertaking that we have with great conviction alongside with Veolia. The ecology can't be regressive. And for me, the most fragile populations, well, the environment is a source of growth. It has to produce jobs. It has to produce buying power to ensure that the environment improves living conditions and opens up hope for the future. We have to get people to hope again. So, giving perspectives. Antoine Frérot. So, Monsieur Cuvillier was talking about the merger with Suez. This is something we will be coming back to in the roundtable, especially with the economists who will be joining us, and some employees as well. Because today we're covering everything. We've talked about resilience, about solutions, about the merger, about globalization. Yes, because a project to merge with Suez, this is an industrial project to develop solutions to serve actors on the ground, to serve the stakeholders, our clients, our employees, our suppliers as well. We haven't mentioned them yet, but also future generations and shareholders, of course. Resilience, what is it? It's not huddling over to avoid blows. It's knowing that shocks are going to come. All living organisms have to face them. Companies, cities, etc. So, first of all, you have to anticipate such shocks, and then to ensure that the consequences won't be too terrible. And resilience is all about overturning Schumpeter's predictions. Saying, okay, things are getting bad, things get worse, things fall apart. But Schumpeter forgets that actually this creates consequences that can be avoided if you're careful and you don't let things die, if you anticipate. You reseed, you refeed, like Frédéric Couillier was talking about earlier. That's also resilience. It's a positive principle. So staying on this term resilience, let's now go to Stuart Love around this question, because we have the current context where there's the Brexit, there's the pandemic. Do you have the means? Do you have a way to meet your ecological ambitions? And is this really a priority for your citizens?
That's a really, really good question. But the answer to the last part of your question is yes, absolutely, it is a priority for our citizens. And that is the reason why it's such an important part of our vision for the city. But it's critically important as we come out of the pandemic and we look to the future of the city. And we firmly believe that the city does have a future and that city centres have a future. But what we absolutely recognize is in order for people to want to come back into the city, one of the things we have to address is the poor air quality that Westminster has. As I've already said, we have some of the worst air quality in the country. So yes, it absolutely is a priority. It's for us, for our residents, and for people who come into Westminster. There are challenges, though, and you have highlighted some of them. The state of the economy and the impact that has on us as a city council. We generate a lot of income that's clearly under significant pressure at the moment. But we are committed to this. We are investing tens of millions of pounds in our own housing stock. We are seeking funding from government to assist us. And the government here as well has made it very clear that they see the economic recovery. They're calling it a green recovery. So there is funding available for us to draw down, to invest back into the city. We are an historic city, so we have lots of old buildings, and actually that's about 75% of the problem we have in Westminster in terms of emissions is in those buildings. So we are using the levers that we have through our planning functions, through our partnerships, again, with Veolia and how Veolia work with the rest of our private sector partners. There's a whole ecosystem that we have to bring together in order to make this work and in order to achieve our ambitions for the city. But yes, it absolutely is a priority for us and remains a priority for us.
Okay, thank you, from Westminster. So now going back to Nevers, Denis Thuriot, and then we'll conclude with you, Olivier Brousse. So to come back to the term of resilience, how do you convince your fellow citizens of the importance of the environment and the measures that you'll be taking without making it look like some sort of a punishment? You called it more like an applicative policy rather than a participative policy, but I'm not quite sure I understand the distinction. Well, I'm a lawyer, so that's why I'm very specific in what I say. So I talk about adaptation rather than resilience. I think it's more positive because it's natural for us to adapt. Territories, humans, nature, we adapt. We always have, as far as we know. So I think it's important. And when I talk about an applicative policy, participation is great, but I launched a consultation. I asked 800 people and only about 30 replied. So participation isn't always there. But when we have a contract, through an election, we try to meet their expectations. So with public procurement, etc., well, there are some things that we can involve them in. We can ask about the beauty of a project or call upon them to say how we're going to use certain spaces. But it mustn't be punishment, because that just leads to dissatisfaction. So I prefer the term of ecological transformation. I try to motivate people. Sometimes I give bonuses. I want to make it positive. It can be small things or large things. We've innovated a lot in Nevers. We talk about partnerships with the private sector, and this is really how we'll be able to get where we want to go. We need public-private partnerships. And we're part of a network of middle-sized cities. We have our own tech fairs in September, to really show that innovation can also go through small cities solutions for water treatment, heating networks, filters. But also we try to encourage our citizens to be cleaner, to not throw their masks on the ground. And this could be through outreach in schools, partners such as Veolia, and then simple things. We have a mechanism called adopt a chicken. And we feed them waste. So what was the name of that again? So adopt a beak. So a chicken's beak. That's an adoption scheme for chickens. And we have to order new chickens all the time because it's very popular. And we have composters as well. And we sell at cost. So we try to keep our circuits very short. And now our fellow citizens are finally picking up on this and adopting such solutions. Thank you very much, Denis Curieux. So Olivier Brousse, very quickly. So citizens are now finally participating. So you think that citizens are really aware of the problems now, and industries as well? I think indeed that we're at a historical moment, and it's up to us to really grasp it. Because as you've said, and our guests have said, there's very high expectations from citizens, because it's the quality of their life and the quality of life of their children. And in the world we live in is now having to face several crises: this health crisis, the economic crisis, and the ecological crisis. And there's something extraordinary happening today. Governments have almost all realized that the ecological transformation was part of the solution to come out of this crisis. And currently there's more financing available than actual projects to spend that money. And it's up to public authorities, up to local authorities and companies like Veolia to get together to invent those solutions we need, to come up with the projects we need to meet the challenges of the ecological transformation, to create economic opportunities, to create jobs, to create skills, and to use this very particular moment in history to create a better world. And that's why we want to create this champion of the ecological transformation, so that we can go farther and stronger and faster. We don't want to miss this turning point in history, because there's very strong expectation, there's a need for funding, and it's up to us to invent the projects for that funding. Thank you very much, Stuart Love from Westminster. Thank you to the Mayor of Nevers and Boulogne. So we've talked about local solutions, local innovations, this notion of resilience, adaptation, and then projects for tomorrow. So yes, a project for tomorrow. Yes, it will require a lot of funding, but now what we need are results. The pipelines have to be well organized. Between the goal and then the means to get there, things have to be simplified. I was struck by an experiment that we have in my harbor. It's a specific boat that carries out operations in polar areas, and they're waiting for funding to be able to decrease their impact in CO2 by half. But it's considered that it wasn't innovative enough. But the goal was to decrease the impact in CO2, and that's at the heart of everything. But very often, public policy, politicians, and I was one of them, people settle on one single method instead of having a whole diversity of possibilities, and to leverage efficiencies. Because it's whenever there is efficiency, there should be funding. But now they have to be implemented. Yes, thank you very much for all of these use cases. Thank you to all of you behind your screens and here on the stage. So after industry, after territories, let's now go to another one of the major stakeholders in the ecological transformation, and that is the employees. What professions should we create tomorrow? Which professions are going to disappear? How can we increase our skill set? How can we pool our abilities to create jobs? So it's simple and complex at the same time, but employees, are they winners or the losers of the ecological transformation? Now, a few images. Industrial revolutions have always changed the way we live in our organizations. Above all, our jobs and our know-how. The ecological and digital revolution that we are currently undergoing is no exception. Skills evolve rapidly, and both companies and employees must adapt. We must educate ourselves, develop our qualifications, rethink our corporate culture, and become more resilient in order to be a player in the world of tomorrow. But faced with the scale and pace of this change, how can employees benefit from the ecological transformation? Yes, so what about employees with this ongoing revolution? So you saw those images, and now we'll be talking about it here. So we still have Antoine Frérot, of course, and now we have Philippe de Sertine. Welcome. So you're an economist and globalization, the jobs of tomorrow. We'll be talking a lot about that with you. Jean-Marie Lambert, welcome. You are Director of Human Resources at Veolia. And we also have employees, so Christian Chabat. Hello, Christian Chabat. So you are a Veolia employee. You're also a trade unionist. You can hear us? Yes, very good. Thank you. And Jean-Dominique Simon-Poli, so you used to be a trade unionist. Yes, you can hear us? Okay. Very pleased to see you remotely. And we also have Patricia Béal, who is also an employee. She's also a trade unionist. Hello, welcome. Welcome to all of you for our third roundtable, a very important one. So, Antoine Frérot, if we may, let's begin with a sort of an overview. So, Philippe de Sertine, how do you see this ecological transformation? What do you think the impacts will be tomorrow in offices for our employees? It's going to have an impact on all of us. Yes. As we said earlier, this really is a turning point in history. So not just in our economy in France, but at world level, and also in how we're going to be living on this planet. I really think that we're at a time where everything needs to be reinvented, and we have to be very humble, because there's a lot that's now starting, things that nobody had foreseen. And what's been happening for the past year with coronavirus is a perfect illustration of this. But also for all of the innovations we see, we realize that every time we have our forecasts, but then they're overturned by reality, the way people are actually experiencing things. And this, I think, is really a crucial element that we have to bear in mind. We also have to remember that the model we have to propose isn't just the model of wealthy countries. The question of the environment and of the old model, which has led to a standstill. Our model was designed for 2.5 billion people. There are going to be 8 billion of us in 2023, and then 10 billion at the end of the century. And we'll probably continue growing. So it's not countries with small populations getting older which are the problem. What we need is solutions for the entire world. First and foremost, there where it's needed the most, there with the most inhabitants. Asia, 4.3 billion inhabitants. And that's the driver of the world economy right now. Tomorrow it will be Africa. At the end of the century, they will have doubled the number of inhabitants. They will have gone beyond Asia. And so those are some of the major challenges we have to face. We need a model that fits everyone. And humans have to be at the heart of it. It's humans and how humans live, how humans organize, how humans come up with solutions for today and tomorrow. So agility maybe would be a key word here. This is something that I'm sure will be coming back again and again in this third round table. So Patricia Lebel. So this agility we're going to be needing. Is this an opportunity for employment as you see it? I'd say actually today yes, it's an opportunity. So I'm a trade unionist, and our worries are really about jobs, of course. And changes in the environment will obviously have an impact on our sector of activity. And so we're going to have to be creating new jobs, new professions. And at the same time, we'll also be losing jobs. And we believe that it's necessary to ensure that the ecological transformation is really thought through and well prepared. And that's why we have to know changes in professions for the ecological, so that we can identify the true needs in training and rethink what we need to do for professional reconversions to adapt to a changing world. And we need to adapt training depending on new skill sets that are required. And in this area, I think that employees and employee representatives really have to be part of this, part of the ecological transformation. It has to be at the center of social dialogue, because we're at the very beginning right now. So we don't have a very clear view yet, but we're really looking into it very carefully. So Christian Chavat, you're also an employee, and Monsieur Frérot will also be talking about the merger with Suez and the impact it could have on employees or the issues it raises, and Jean-Marie Lambert and also Philippe Dessertine to see what impact this will have and whether it's really necessary to create this much larger company. So, Christian Chavat, how do you see the changes triggered by ecological transformation and the jobs of tomorrow? So I won't come back to everything that's already been said, but I think that jobs will be different depending on the various business lines. For industry, for ecological services, we'll all have to adapt. We'll have to make sure that our employees aren't left behind. So what I'm mainly familiar with are environmental services. And I think that this is where the major changes are going to be happening. In waste collection, it will be more and more selective. What are we going to be doing with our teams, with our equipment, in bids for tender? Municipalities now have heightened their commitments. They're now based more on performance contracts and not just on the price. And I'm sure we don't know everything we need to know about the jobs of the future. I think they're going to be things completely unexpected. And then there's another term, well, people talk a lot about transformation, the ecological transformation. But this is also a brutal change in paradigm. So I'm more in favor of an ecological transition, which gives people time to adapt and to feel reassured. Yes, Antoine Frérot, yes. So a reaction, please.
So 2 answers concerning waste. When we collect waste, it's an activity which is which can be seen as low skill, not very technical, and probably an activity which is going to become poorer. But waste management is the activity that is going to incur the highest amount of modifications and innovations. And in the last 20 years, we both know that we've seen a lot of changes. It used to be bulldozers in a landfill, and now we're talking about AI and chemistry to manage waste. And these changes are going to continue. This industry is both a risk, but it's also a great opportunity with recycling and waste use, because it's a local resource. Estelle earlier was saying it's here that we have this great source of resources. And these populations that are going to see their trades disappear can invest in these new jobs, can be trained for these new jobs. And this is going to be one of the great issues of the green transformation. There will be much more employment in these industries in the future. To recycle, it's 6 to 10 times more jobs than to simply put waste in a landfill. So structurally speaking, it's positive. Also, these jobs can't be done abroad. They have to be locally sourced. So when we talk about transition, we can be a victim of transition. Of transformation, but transition is something we are actors of. And if we wanted to go our way, we have to take the initiative. That's why I prefer to speak of transformation, because it's a willingness of an individual or a group to anticipate and change the world in a way that isn't detrimental to them. When you are a victim of transition, well, it's sometimes very difficult. And in terms of ecological emergency, well, do we have a lot of spare time to find solutions? The earlier we manage to find solutions, the better it is. The situation is rather urgent, so we have to do this in an orderly fashion. We have to take steps in the right directions, but structurally, we can create these jobs, which are more technical, probably a little sharper than what we see in the industry today. And we have to plan for the skills, for the jobs, and for the training programs. And that's, yes, what I'm going to discuss with our guest very soon. Patricia Béal, in terms of training, are we in line with the radical changes and the needs that Antoine Frérot just expressed? I didn't understand your question. I was saying we're talking about training programs with Antoine Frérot, and I was asking you, are the training programs, and Christian Chavat, the same question for you, are the training programs adequate considering the radical changes we're going to see in the future, as Antoine Frérot described it? I would say today that's not the case. There's a lot of work to do, and there are plans to be created. And it's what I said in my introduction. We have to, companies have to work on the needs and on the support they provide to their collaborators. We're right now at the beginning, the first steps concerning training programs. With the healthcare crisis, we're developing digital work a lot, but it's not enough. We really have to work on training people for the future. That's what Christian Chavat was saying as well. But right now, we don't have sufficiently robust plans for that. Philippe de Sertine, this information is impossible to avoid. There will be more jobs, but people won't be doing the same job for their whole life. Yes, it's already the case. And earlier, I heard about your idea of transition because from a human perspective, we would like to have a little bit of time. Our generation has this responsibility. We don't have any time, and we have to implement everything so that everyone at every level can have the best experience within the frame of this extremely fast change. And over the last year, we've had something amazing that has stopped the economy. And right now, we're really frozen. We have the impression that the economy is in a crisis, the likes of which we've never seen, but it's going to fire up very quickly afterwards. And at the beginning of 2020, we had this lack of skill. The real problem of the future is that we are going to need people who have experience of the industry of their client, but they're going to have to change the way they work on a daily basis. But that's really the stake of our transformation. Forgive me for keeping that word. We have to change. We have to capitalize on our knowledge and experiences, but we're also going to need new people, young people. We're also going to need people who have experience. But in the way that they interface, things are going to change constantly. So we not only have to look at this through the lens of training, improve the quality of people and their knowledge, but we're going to have to be able to change constantly, to adapt constantly, even at the highest level of the company, learning new ways of communicating, new ways of looking at financing. And when we look at all these technical jobs where new technology is constantly at play, we're going to have to transform ourselves constantly as well. So yes, these transformations happen within the frame of the ecological transformation, but it's also an issue for this alliance between Suez and Veolia, because employees are asking themselves questions about which jobs are going to stay open and which are going to disappear. And how I would like to ask you how you know that your project will not destroy jobs, and you'll answer it in a minute, but first we'll have Mr. Simopoli with the Dialogue Association. You've left the company, but you're very aware of what's going on. How do you see this alliance between Veolia and Suez today? What we can see is that employees have a lot of questions, and this creates a bit of anxiety. But it's true for any merger, not just this one. But my question is the following, Mr. Frérot. You've made commitments on the 11th of March in an interview for Les Echos. You're saying that all activities are going to be financed by a fund, and this fund is going to maintain jobs for 4 years once the companies are merged. But to avoid these promises from being false promises, what are you prepared to do to ensure these commitments are fulfilled? Do you have a reason? So you have a mission statement. You're one of the first French companies to do it. Of course, these commitments have to be fulfilled, but how can they be fulfilled? And tomorrow, do you consider that you might implement cooperation with the unions of Veolia and Suez to make sure that your commitments are binding? It's the same question by Thomas. I think you'll both answer, Antoine Frérot and Jean-Marie Laubert. So I'm going to give you a two-part answer. First of all, the jobs in our trades are territorial: management of water, management of waste. These cannot be compressed spatially. It's not like in an industrial job where you turn two industrial centers into a single industrial center. We can't make a waste management plant in one city work with the staff of another city. So first of all, we have less of a scale effect on jobs, but there are people, support staff, in these operational teams, they can be worried. So the first answer is we guarantee this, and I have a proposition for that. Because the question is, very often when there's mergers, there have been promises like this, and we've seen that after a few years, these promises aren't upheld. We have General Electric and Alstom as examples. But you can see that our project is not a financial project. It's not for cost synergies. It's first and foremost a development project for commercial synergies to create new solutions and implement new solutions. And the environmental transformation is going to create jobs, local jobs. It's going to create a lot more than this transformation will destroy. So it's going to be a net positive, and our job is to create these jobs. So in the Veolia group, when there will be more jobs than there are today, but of course, love only exists where it can be proven. So concerning these promises of not destroying jobs, I made a proposition to Parliament which asked the same question. It was in the Senate, but I made this promise before Parliament as well. Every time we talk about this issue of jobs that are going to disappear, Veolia Suez is not the first and last merger that's going to be facing this issue. So I would like this merger to be a case study in how to make sure that these promises, if they are broken by my company, then the company will have to pay. Will have to pay for every job it destroys. So for every job we destroy, the company will have a fine. And I propose that. It's not very complicated to implement a procedure to check and to punish if the commitments we've made are not upheld. There are two types of commitments. First of all, we will not destroy any jobs, but we will also keep the current job conditions for employees, for all of the teams that join Veolia, and all of those that will join the new shareholder, because the competition watchdogs will force us to sell a part of the activity. And those who are allowed to buy into these activities will also have to make the same commitments and face the same punishments. Earlier, I was saying that the principle that those who pollute pay for the pollution is a good principle, and I believe that the system I'm proposing now is a good system to destroy false promises, because if it's more expensive to break a promise than to uphold it, then we will uphold the promise. But we have the means to keep our promises, because these new technological solutions will create jobs, and also because there will be someone that checks that we keep our promises, and we agree that these should be representatives of the unions. I'm the first one to agree on that, and I'm the first one to say that I am happy to involve you in measuring, in controlling, and in punishment if we don't uphold our promises. So these are commitments by Mr. Frérot. Does this reassure you? Yes, I think it reassures the employees first and foremost, those of Suez and Veolia. It's quite rare to hear this at this level, and I believe that this can alleviate a certain level of anxiety that many people might have. Mr. Lambert, you are the Human Resources Director of Veolia, and we're going to talk to Philippe de Ferty soon. So in this context of globalization, we should discuss this, because there have been questions from our viewers. Redundancy maybe of certain jobs, because two champions means similar skills. Like Antoine Frérot said, there's very little redundancy. In almost all cases, we're talking about local jobs, both in France and abroad. where the question is raised is for support functions and management functions, and our answer is that we need everyone on board. Everyone can find a spot in the new group, but we have to have objective criteria for choice, and our commitment is to have consultants that help us have the best people in the best jobs, and we will uphold this commitment. And for all those who believe they might be redundant, we will have training programs. When we reorganize Veolia, when we regroup zones, that's what we do, with a lot of success and a lot of satisfaction for concerned employees. So this is a very specific answer. Philippe Dessertine, as an economist, what do you think about this alliance between Veolia and Suez? Are we talking about a classic merger of two large companies, as many others have in the past? And if that's not the case, how is it different? Well, first of all, these are always extraordinary stories when two very large companies come together, such as Veolia and Suez. I believe there's one element that's absolutely crucial, which is the thematic of our discussion today, which is that what the two groups are facing today. They're both involved in markets with extremely high potential, and this is something that we say very generically in terms of management. But you have to really understand ecologically the way we see our relationship to water, to energy. This is not something that's going to be stable. It's going to be there's going to be an explosive transformation. So when we talk about the French territory, about the European territory, employees can legitimately wonder what happens when there's a merger, but the needs are going to constantly increase, and the quality, the demands on quality are going to constantly increase, which means that the experiences by both groups can be combined, and they can be used, and all the resources are needed. And this relies on the human qualities of the staff involved. We really have to be aware of that, and it's really a challenge. It's a very positive challenge locally. But of course, when you're talking about the global economy and we're talking about multinational companies present worldwide, well, when we look at what's going to happen in the rest of the world, we have to be aware of how quickly we are going to be required in territories far away. But even in Europe, within the borders of Europe, we're constantly going to have new opportunities, and it's going to change very quickly. When I tell you that the economy is going to start up very quickly, we don't have an economic crisis that comes from an external factor. The biggest danger is thinking that it's a different, same type of crisis as always. It's like an electric engine. It's stopped, and it's going to start up very, very, very quickly when it starts back up. So there's going to be competition with very large companies everywhere around the world. What happened around the vaccine must really alarm us as Europeans and as French people. When it starts up, we can't miss out, because if we miss out, it's over. And France, really, in France, we don't realize how extraordinary our reputation is internationally, thanks to COP21, for instance. People consider it where we think about the environmental issues, it's in France. Even in Europe, as with luxury, the environment is one of our strong points. So on a global level, when you have an issue, you go to talk to the French, but if they aren't available, if there's not enough deployable energy, you're going to go see immediately elsewhere, because these problems can't wait. So we have to create something that's operational. And from my external point of view as an economist, I think it's perfectly in line with historic evolutions, but we also have to do it very quickly. We can't lose too much energy talking, discussing, struggling amongst ourselves, because tomorrow the clients, and that's the real issue. Clients need answers very quickly. Thank you, Mr. Dessertine, Mr. Frérot. We must manage this ecological and economical transition. Yes, what's important is this concept of sovereignty, and for employment, it's very important. Suez was sold by its shareholder. Many companies were sold. when it was bought out by foreign companies, the jobs, the steering jobs, the executive jobs, the creative jobs disappeared from the French territory. 20 years ago, Péchinet was really something in France. Today it's nothing. And it will be the same for many large French companies. We've lost a lot of these companies, and these jobs will disappear. And over time, for employment in France, we're going to pay for that. Which is why an industrial project, a French industrial project, is important. We often forget this issue of sovereignty, but it's very important. And Monsieur Dessertine highlighted this. In France, we are one step ahead in terms of know-how on these issues. And if these companies are bought out by foreign companies, we will lose this head start and we will lose these jobs, which is why the sovereignty of the project is a crucial element for our ability to keep creating jobs in France and to maintain an industrial vision in terms of development and growth. Thank you, Antoine Frérot. Thank you for being here with us on this roundtable. Monsieur Chapat, I couldn't hear you anymore. Please tell us, you heard everything we've just said, what Antoine Frérot and Jean-Marie Lanvert said as an answer to Simon Pauly's questions. Maybe you want to add to that? Yes, it's a bit frustrating because it's difficult to react on a format like this. I just wanted to say that this transformation, which will go through several transitions. Yes, Monsieur Chavat is very, really wants to make the distinction between these two terms. It will have to happen hand in hand with the employees, and you'll have to work with them. When it comes to the alliance between Veolia and Suez, I don't know if it will happen, but you know as well. We heard your promises, and we will be watching you closely for the employees of Veolia and for our colleagues in Suez. And it's important. It's important to make these promises. We'll see what the result is, but concerning jobs, we're going to be very careful to make sure that everyone keeps their jobs with skills. Yes, these jobs will be saved, and there's an ambition for a project and the meaningfulness that we want to put in the work of all our staff, and I believe that matters as well, and that's why these jobs will be kept and will be developed, because our work is meaningful, and when you become the main driver of solutions for ecological transformation, it creates a lot of meaning for our employees, all our employees. And I believe that will carry us into the future. But of course, any predictions on any planification for jobs has to be done hand in hand with employees, because we invent skills as we need them. So a lot of meaning, a lot of ambition, as you were saying, Mr. Frérot, and I just wanted to hear Mr. Lambert quickly. The final word, it's a question of our viewers, of Anne, for instance, on support concerning transformation. So quickly, we were working on a system that allowed us to better work on the transition between different jobs, and now we have to work on a transformation system with social partners. First of all, we have to involve representatives of the workforce. We don't do that enough. And the second point is that the training programs which we develop and that we present to the unions are aware that we are trying to help old jobs transform into new jobs. Right now, we have a lot of jobs that don't have problems, but the question is, how do we create new jobs that are going to be pioneers in terms of air quality, in terms of plastic recycling, and that's what we'll have to build with the management and with employee representatives everywhere. So a final word to conclude. 40 years ago in France, we invented what was called throughout the world the French School of Water. because by reuniting players, political, economic, and academic players in water, we create a specific model which inspired the world and was developed throughout the world. And this alliance between Veolia and Suez can be the occasion of creating the French school of ecological transformation, and I'm convinced our company can play an important role if it works hand in hand with these political, industrial, academic partners to create the French school of thought of ecological transformation. If our companies have this head start, it's because 40 years ago we did this. And I believe we should do it, I want to do it again today, beyond the realm of the environment. We have this golden opportunity. Suez is for sale. We have to take this opportunity. So you've highlighted the importance of this project with very strong commitments. Thank you all for being here, for being at this round table. Thank you, Philippe Dessertine, for being with us today. Thank you, Jean-Marie Lambert. We're going to stay together, but we're going to listen to Philippe Tibi, and he's president of the Scale Up project at the Ministry of Finances, and he's a professor at Polytechnique. We're going to listen to him now. So when you think about new players in this domain, you always have to think about China. President Xi launched the Beautiful China agenda in 2017 to fight pollution, which was seen as a source of political instability. In the environmental sector, we'll have many sources of government aid. The circular economy was one of the great plans for industrial excellence in China, just as they did so for rail and nuclear. 20 years ago, they were clients of the West, and now they are feared competitors. And then there are reasons which are specific to this industry, to the environmental industry. First of all, the role of technology in the value chains. Second, the critical size of the domestic market, and the state that considers the environment as an element of its diplomatic toolbox, because the environment belongs to the sector of infrastructure. Europe has to use its comparative advantages. First of all, the power of its domestic market and its huge potential, scientific and technological potential. But it has to be in service of political will, and from that point of view, the Green Deal is a perfect opportunity. Agility and size are assets in these sectors driven by technological innovation. Scale allows you to amortize the cost of R&D on a large portfolio of clients who want solutions at a reasonable price. R&D is the core of the fourth industrial revolution, and today we have to develop these solutions that will be operational in 5 to 10 years, and large companies are the only ones who can implement them quickly. In this industry, technological challenges are new and many. Recycling the batteries for electric cars is a good example. Sufficient R&D financing must not only rely on the European Pact. The polluter has to compensate the fixer in line with the scale of the damage done. This is the societal demand which will change things. Yes, this has been at the core of these 2 hours of talk. We are at the end of this extremely interesting broadcast. It's hard to sum this up because we've just been through something extremely rich and interesting. There's a lot of willpower, there's a lot of solutions, but the challenges are great. Antoine Frérot, thank you for welcoming me at this round table, for allowing me to be a part of this environmental transformation with you. I believe you might have a lot of things to say on what has just been said, and now I'm going to let you conclude, but afterwards we'll have questions from journalists.
Thanks to you, Nathalie Lévy, for having been here with us this morning, and thanks to our guests who did us the honor of having participated in person or remotely and having shared their experiences. Dear friends, we've come to the end of this show. I hope you found it interesting. 1 year after we launched our strategic program, Impact 2023, and 7 years after we announced our goal of merging with Suez, we felt it was important to take the time for an exchange with many different stakeholders around this ecological transformation. And given the urgence of the climate situation, that really is the challenge of this century, or at least the first part of the century, we are utterly convinced that we must work concretely and also collectively to protect our planet. We also feel that we have to go beyond an ecological transition. Our ambitions have to be stronger. We really need a transformation. In the exchanges this morning, I think we all have the same realization. If we want to succeed here, we're going to have to make structural changes and decisions. Sometimes these decisions are going to be difficult. We need change. The environment has to be at the heart of all of our decisions. And we have to make choices which are going to have an impact for many years to come, probably decades, because the battles of the future are being fought right now. And for Veolia, we've seen what this means. First of all, we have to reinvent our traditional professions in water, in waste. And we have to accelerate the deployment of solutions to accelerate preservation of the planet, and especially giving ourselves the means of inventing as quickly as possible solutions that we don't yet have, but which will allow us to win this battle. We've said several times, the exercise we went through this morning really shows that for Veolia, success is based on our impact and our usefulness for all of our stakeholders. We talked about employees, clients, shareholders, young people, the planet. And we want to be a benchmark company for the ecological transformation. More than ever, that's our ambition, and that is the goal of our company. We want to allow our clients, industries, municipalities to reduce the impact of their activities, to come up with new solutions for citizens, to translate their strong commitment in favor of the environment into action. That we don't want punitive ecology, we want a positive ecology. We want to be able to contribute concretely to common action that has meaning, purpose, and that's useful for the environment. And we also want to propose to our shareholders a model for sustainable growth that's profitable, but that's also responsible in societal terms. And I'm very happy that once again I was able to exchange with several of our stakeholders, and I very sincerely want to thank them for their presence and for taking part in this roundtable. And before we wind up this very special show, I would like to say a word about a project that I've been working on for several months now. The idea is to create a company in France which would be the world champion of the ecological transformation by merging Veolia and Suez. It's an historical opportunity to accelerate necessary movement towards transformation. It would be a wonderful way of going farther, stronger, faster, to really change the game. There's no more important ambition than to succeed in this ecological transformation. It's an industrial ambition, and it really meets the expectations of all of our stakeholders. As we saw this morning, a lot of people are ready to really roll up their sleeves and to tackle the problem, to change the model, to find solutions. The models are there. Some will have to invent. So it's really the right time to create a major player capable of developing new solutions, investing intelligently, and being a very strong partner in its ecological transition and transformation. For the world after COVID, that's what we need, and that's what we wish to do. This is a fully French project, and it honors the memory of our country, because it's in this country that we have developed all of these activities. And this world champion that we hope to create will be based on French culture and European culture, a culture of partnerships, and it will preserve the specificities of the relations between Veolia, Suez, and local territories. If we want this model to persist, we have to tackle it right now. Otherwise, we will be overtaken by competition from China or from the US. They don't have that same culture we do. France and Europe are being challenged more and more on the industrial playing field because we haven't been able to meet our ambitions on time. Here, we have the opportunity to get a true head start in a sector which will certainly be one of the most active in the coming decades. And this opportunity, it's not just for Veolia and Suez. This is an opportunity for all stakeholders of both of our groups. Local authorities, elected officials in France, elsewhere, industrials around the world, employees, students, consumers, citizens. This world champion of the ecological transformation will be an opportunity for everyone. Thank you very much for your attention, and see you very soon. Enjoy the rest of your day.